The road you didn't take hardly comes to mind, does it? The door you didn't try, where could it have led? The choice you didn't make never was defined, was it? Dreams you didn't dare are dead, were they ever there? Who said, I don't remember at all?
I wanted to get changed.
Well, the main thing is you keep your trousers on for this holiday. Gosh, you were in fine fettle this evening, Philip.
Oh.
My goodness. There are so many emotional buttons for me in this particular selection of songs as well. And in a room like this, there's nowhere to hide, is there?
No.
It's up close and as personal as it can get. Why did you choose this kind of venue for this return?
Well, we didn't have a choice, really, because Anne-Marie tried. We couldn't find anywhere to do it. The reason we did 7 shows is because it'll just cover our costs to get here and back. So, to be honest, and it's a shame that London doesn't have, has so few places, rooms like this, really. It's a shame because, and it puts a lot of pressure because people have got to get out for the next show to come in, and that puts a terrible pressure on the sound and people. So, you know, and we all share this incredible dressing room, so it's tiny, it's a cupboard.
It is.
And that's wonderful, but it's not so glamorous there, or the pressure that the staff are wonderful here, to technically having to try and deal with all different styles of music. But it's so we were just lucky to. Cameron said you should have booked it for a month. He came in the other night and said, "Darling, you should have been here for a month." But Anne-Marie worked it out carefully because just one of the reasons I find singing hard is doing it night after night, but. She'd sort of arranged to just have a break, and it was wonderful to actually have a little break between shows.
Between shows, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you happy just being, you look very at home, just being Philip Quast, as opposed to being another person?
Well, there's always a part of you keep to yourself, because although it's about as honest as I can get, but there's part of you you just have to keep slightly private, because that's your fuel. And my wife probably knows it, and my kids to some respect. I thought it was unfair. A friend of mine's just written a wonderful autobiography, Noni Hazelhurst, and it's incredible. We did play school together for years, and she doesn't mention her sons by name in the book, and she said because that's their stories to tell. But my boys are okay. They're such an important part of my life, and they know. I don't use the word proud because it's wrong. It feels like I have some responsibility for the way they've become. You know, I'm pleased for them, and it was very humbling for Toby to do that show that he did, where he describes this. He starts off the show because I taught him at acting school, which is no mean feat to be taught at an acting school by your father, both of them, and. But he starts the show talking about the stress and the torment he had. And I kept telling him, be honest, be honest, be honest, be honest, be honest, don't lie, tell the truth. And so he was telling the audience how when he was at acting school, the most traumatic thing in his life was when the teacher tied him up with a mic cord, his hands behind his back, because he was doing all his acting with his arms and not his brain. And then at the end of the show, he tells the audience, when I was sitting there, he said, and that teacher was my dad. And they all looked at me, and everyone was so horrified. But he publicly forgave me on stage, because he said Dad was right, but I still caused him a lot of pain. But
gosh, you know, that 15 years you spent, 17 years?
17 years. I did 290 episodes, I think.
What you said about, you know, I know truth is very important to you as an actor, and we see it all the time in your work. In fact, when I first saw you in Sunday in the Park with George, I didn't know anything about you. And I remember sitting there and you got to finishing the hat, and I thought, this man's thought processes are so clear. And I guess doing all those years with kids, you learn you have to be truthful because you can't lie to them.
Well, it's that whole thing about being present in the moment is true, and yet you have the point about rehearsal is to work out where the narrative is, so that you're all telling the same story on stage, but you can't plan too much because life doesn't work like that. If you don't leave yourself open to the moment, the surprises that come in life will knock you over. And even if they do knock you over, that's part of the thing. So even getting up here and doing this, people don't see me do funny things much because all my parts have been sort of quite serious, except Milus Gloriosus, I think I did.
Yeah.
Which I had the best time on, and and I improvised it every night. And I love that feeling because it's just you live and die on your own, the moment. And all the time here, I'm juggling, trying not to say the wrong thing because I'm trying to. I mean, there's a line I had where I sit on that stool. I said it one night, and I threw it in, and I don't know why it came out, but I said, I wonder if it's called a stool because you sit on it. Or because you sit on it, it's called a stool. And it had about that reaction as well.
Yeah.
But I suddenly become obsessed with poo. Because
And genitalia.
And genitalia.
We've had the genitalia jokes,
but it's to do with that child element. And the trouble is about those big parts that I've played. Look, all acting is interrupted thought. That's basically the point. If you leave yourself open, you've got to just stay there until the next thought interrupts it. And everything, that's all acting is, interrupted thought. And you have, and I suppose all my work has been, if I'm singing, there, where, I'm just holding it till the next one comes. What about there? And do you know what I mean? And that takes a lot of sitting alone with yourself and lonely work in a room, which is tough on everyone around you.
Putting together a cabaret set is an art in itself. I mean, how long did you and Anne-Marie take to sort out this 70, 80 minutes of...
Well, we had to rewrite the dialogue. The songs changed. We did the one we did at COVID. I called during COVID, the one where my dad died. I went back into the very first theatre that I performed in, and to stand on the stage, and I literally stood on the spot where I sang the Candide. Is this all? And we were thinking about singing it here just now. This the world, death and envy, and to stand on that space, it all came back. So we worked that around that. I think, Imelda said to me, "Oh, darling, even though you're not doing 8 shows, you could keep performing this one for years." But this show is no longer applicable to. Once I leave, if I come back in 6 months' time, it's a different world, and I'm a different person. So I'd have to rewrite it again and sing the songs in a different way. Someone said the other night I should sing more big ones, like you need more. And I wanted to say, how much do you want for £35?
Absolutely. You called it The Road I Took, as opposed to The Road You Didn't Take, which is that wonderful, it's the song in Follies. It's the show. And unbelievably, it was cut when Cameron Mackintosh first brought the show to London. He rewrote the ending, or the book writer rewrote the ending. And I actually said to Sondheim once, how could you lose that song? And he gave me an interesting reply. He said, well, I'm a collaborator. He said, and the other people involved in the project wanted us to take a different look at the piece and revamp it a bit. But that song really is the key, isn't it? And also Ben's breakdown at the end of the show.
Yes, because that's all the art. That's all our artifice. When because we're all pretending, we're all lying in our own different ways.
Yeah.
We lie to ourselves, we lie to everyone, and in the end, the hope in that play. My darling Janie's here tonight,
Yes,
which means a lot to me. I had the best time with you, Janie. I really did. It was just wonderful.
It was such a great production.
Yeah, but it's but Stephen said that line, "The Ben I'll never be, who remembers him?" It's the one time he said he allowed himself a little bit of self-satisfaction, but not enough to border on hubris. He said that was one line I wrote where I sat back and went, "Oh, that's pretty good." He really loved that line, because I think he could have been a lot of other things. A mathematician or a build, and it's sort of it is that way for me. My depression over the years, and I haven't been easy to live with because I become obsessed with things. I'm so curious about it. And I see it in my sons too. I want to see orchids, and I want to grow orchids, and fishing, and all I do is buy fishing gear because I imagine what it'll be like using it. Or do you know what I mean?
I do. I mean, I do.
Sorry, just to finish, the road I took really is part of me, and I've been with AM going through this, and we sort of did less teaching last year because teaching's hard now. It's harder for older people for all sorts of reasons, but I love it. But it's been confronting for a lot of people that I work with to say, when I walk up, I've just let a play go, I don't want to do it anymore. And they go, because I don't see myself as existing by what I do as opposed to who I am. And I just want some nights off to be present with my partner so I can laugh a little bit more, because when you wake up in the morning when you're singing, you're always checking.
Yeah.
So your days aren't free either.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dear man.
No.
I told you you'd get home by breakfast tomorrow.
The reason that the Follies production was so wonderful was because of the acting. And when Sondheim referred to collaborators, I mean, that's why his work is so great, because he chooses his collaborators very carefully. You can't see the division between where he leaves off and the book writer takes over. I mean, it's an extraordinary art. That Follies production stands or falls, any production, on the quality of the acting.
Well, we didn't sort of talk about it that much. We just got up and did it and didn't say no to anything, really. And if you ask how Anne-Marie and I put together the show, I'm a little bit more pragmatic, but I try not to say no to anything. Sometimes I've learned to do that. She'll make a suggestion and I'll go, sometimes I go, no, or let's try it. But generally, I come back the next day and say, yeah, but don't say no to anything. Always, you know what I mean?
Tell us about Ben's breakdown at the end of Follies, because for anybody here who doesn't know Follies, there's this electrifying moment in the Follies scene towards the end where he forgets his words. And, I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. And somehow or other, I saw it 2 or 3 times, and somehow or other it was different every time. Well,
I always smelt a rat when I say a rat. There's a kernel of something there. I've done it in concert a couple of times, and it never quite worked for me. And I listened to some other recordings, and I didn't sort of quite believe it. Because I know that Stephen Sondheim wanted the same moment there as when Sweeney does the Epiphany. When you sir, suddenly, sorry, you jumped. You sir! He wanted the feeling that the actor had lost it.
Yeah.
And he wanted... The
fourth wall comes down.
The fourth wall comes down. And that the audience was suddenly thinking, uh-oh, Len Carrier is having a mental breakdown. And he's actually got where it comes down. And Stephen had always said it's a Pirandello moment where it's got a double reality. And I remember doing it a couple of times, but Dominic, we would do it, we'd start doing it, but then the cast knew every night, they started reacting to, their reactions to my breakdown wasn't believable because they were getting used to it. So Dominic said, just make it different every night, and we had a cue that I was in charge of it. Just like out here now, I was in charge, And when I felt like the impro had finished, I could give Nigel Lilly the cue, and then we could get back on time. And there were some nights where it was just different. I walked off one night, didn't come back for a while, and there was another night, I never forget it, I just stood there and I let myself just, a bit like tonight, where I just waited long enough and waited, and it got really uncomfortable. And I started to well up with emotion, and suddenly someone yelled out, "It's all right, Philip. You can start again." And I meant, why did you, just suddenly back into character, what did you say? And because they should feel uncomfortable in that moment, because that is the moment where we all, when we get caught out in a lie, when finally you realise that there can be a moment like that, when a relationship's over, that you have to face the reality. And I think he was pleased with it. So we improvised it every night. So the cast didn't know what I was going to do, so their reaction was believable.
The play's the thing with Sondheim.
Yeah.
It really is. And the words do come first. And where he doesn't need to write anywhere. I mean, I don't know if you haven't seen the new piece or the last piece. It's coming to the National Theatre. But the second act has virtually no music in it. And it's a bit like the last scene in Assassins, where there's a wonderful scene between Lee Harvey Oswald and Booth. And the librettist told me this story. He showed it to Steve, and Steve read it through and said, yeah, that's great, John, I've got nothing to add. And he thought he meant, I've got no criticism. But what he actually meant was, I don't need to write any music for it. And the fact there wasn't any music made it really electrifying.
Yeah.
And so, the thought and the theatre always comes first.
Yeah.
And what you've just
And the story
described
and
about the
narrative,
last scene. Why have you never played Sweeney?
Well, I thought about that too, because I was going to do it. Jonathan Church came to us, was going to be straight to run the Sydney Theatre Company, but some unfortunate thing happened. And Anne-Marie probably would have been the music MD, but that didn't happen. There was a chance that I could do it, where I was going to do it with another actor, I won't mention their name, who really is sort of I don't know whether non-binary, and I would refer to them as a creature. And so I thought that's a really interesting idea, and it would be small. And so the people who wanted to do it wrote to the trust, whatever, and they said no. So I wrote to him and sent a picture, and I told him, and he gave his permission. He said yes, and then COVID happened, and it didn't happen, so it sort of died. But to be honest, I was scared of it. Because, because I was just scared of the vocal costs, because I know what I would demands I'd put on myself to do it.
But the great thing is you have that low register, which a lot of Sweeneys don't have.
Yeah.
And it sits very low.
Yeah.
And I'd love to have heard you do it.
Well,
seen you do it.
It's the same with people say, why didn't you do Billy? But to be really honest, the right director never really came along. I wouldn't know if I can play it until a director, producer said, oh, we'll do it. But you want the right director to come, I see this in you, because I don't know how many actors I've seen desperate to play a part, and they get to play it, and it's a shit production. So the thing, my ego is not to, you talk about collaboration, I can't imagine myself playing Sweeney unless someone else sees me as Sweeney.
Right. Yeah. You talk a bit about Trevor Nunn. I mean, what do you want from a director, and why was Trevor, both for Javert and for Emil, why was he so special? What does he give you?
Well, he always knows more in the room than anyone else, because he's so well read. He never, ever lets you feel that you may have been miscast. Because if you ever smell that a director has lost the tiniest bit of confidence in you, you're stuffed. And no matter if you're struggling, he knows when to leave it and then come back to it, and leave it and let you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
he talks a lot too, doesn't he?
Well,
almost as much as you do.
but he talks a lot. That whole thing about being Trev'd is wonderful, where he takes you aside and tells you something in your ear. And talking allows him thinking time. But he takes you aside and will whisper something that's private, and then the other actors don't know what's going to happen. So they've got to be open to what you come up with. Now, if you note an actor in front of everyone and say, Ed, when you do this moment there, can you make sure you give that. Everyone, that moment's coming. They're all watching to Ed gets it right. And if you stuff it up, they go, oh, he's not very... You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So he allows you the chance, like children, you never say to a child when they're doing something wrong, why did you do that? You say to a child, if they're sticking their finger in a PowerPoint, you go, oh, hello, Edwin, oh, look at that. And the kid looks over there. You distract them. And I think with the very best directors, you have not got time to think about anything anyone else is doing because they've got you occupied, so that you have to, nothing else, because so many times you will sit and see the solution for something, and if you don't see, but if they keep you so busy in here, then you don't have, all you can worry about is your job.
With Emil in South Pacific, I don't know about you, the audience here, but the moment we went into the Rogers section of this show, the way the air moved in the room changed.
But there's something about that.
Well, I mean,
there's something
genius
about those
is
songs.
what we're talking about.
Honestly, My Little Girl.
Oh yeah. Well, I think Carousel's the greatest score ever written.
And the bench scene is the most important scene ever written for musical theatre.
I do.
Because it combines that stuff you were talking about. It's all the acting stuff and seamless, and complicated and condensed.
I think the miracle of Rogers as a melodist was that he worked with two great partners, but worked the other way around. So with Hart, he couldn't wait for the lyric because Hart was off doing this, that, and the other. So he'd write the tunes first. And with Hammerstein, he wanted the words first.
Yes.
And to be able to do it both ways. Rogers and Hammerstein, I mean, huge success, but they wrote shows that were about serious issues.
Yeah.
But for a very wide audience. South Pacific, I mean, you did Trevor brought the original version back to life.
Yeah, well, the reason the film one existed was because we have had a chat here. We've done one of these ones before, haven't we? The audience, yes. So some of the audience would have heard this chat. So I know what's coming, Ed.
He's going to punish me. Yes, you do later on.
South Pacific's form was because it was too long on the road, and the history of American musicals is that you've got to get them down before 10:25 because you have to catch the train home. It's that simple. And so the structure, it's a 3-act play and a 2-act thing. So the dream ballet or the dream ballet comes, or the fun numbers always after interval, because you're not moving the plot along, and you've got to let the audience settle down, reward them for coming back, etc. And then the plot kicks in again, and then you've got to hold up the plot, so the dream ballet comes, because you've got to wrap it all up, and there's very few new,
What a skill to be able to do that.
Yes, I know, but seriously.
To work to a formula.
It does work. And he follows it in Sweeney Todd. You look how Pie starts the second half. Yeah. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. There's a lovely story about Rogers and Sondheim working on Do I Hear a Waltz? And Rogers turns to Sondheim at one point and says, that's a gorgeous song. He said, we should reprise that in Act 2.
Yeah.
And Sondheim says, why? And he says, because it's a good song. Now, that's the difference between them.
Yeah.
There had to be a reason for everything with Steve, whereas Rogers was still appealing to this.
Well, that's why they had
Broadway
the
formula
overture, though.
audience.
They had the overture so that you sort of knew the songs when you got to them.
Yeah.
But just to go back to the South Pacific,
Yeah.
I don't know whether you remember, those that saw it, what happens in the movie is that Emil de Beck is a peasant. He shouldn't be dressed in white, and I wasn't as such, because he's a peasant, and he actually, in this South Pacific, Tales of the South Pacific, he chokes the man to death. He chokes the guy to death with his bare hands.
Yep.
And in the movie, you'll see Emil de Beck has to confess to Nellie that I killed a man. And she says, what happens? Well, and in the movie it says, well, we fought and he fell and hit his head. Well, that's an accident. And that's no crisis. So what we did was we went back to the original story, and I had to say, I killed a man, and we fought, and I put my hands around his throat, a bit like the Pirandello moment, and I held him, and she was way over the other side of the Olivier, and I held that for nearly a minute and a half while I choked him to death. And she had to see it happen. And then eventually he drops on the ground, and then I look across to her, and now these hands that have killed a man in front of her have to approach her, and then I gently have to take her. And she looks down, these hands, she's just witnessed kill someone, and go, and I love you. And she forgives him. But she can't forgive him for sleeping with a black woman.
Yeah.
That's the whole politics of it. And if he falls and slips on that, that's why it has to be something as mad as that. He kills a fascist with his bare hands to save his village. And they just fought and he hits her head. But that's the whole point. So Trevor, we put that back in because the racism.
You can't fudge it, can you?
No, you can't.
It's a bit like the domestic violence in Carousel. People felt at the time that it was slightly fudged. And contemporary productions have made it more...
Well, we congratulate ourselves that violence from women has stopped. Jesus, worse than it's ever been. I think it's something we need to discuss and really confront. You know, there's too many women are being killed every week at the hands of violent men, and it's definitely one of our big crises. You know, so to not have it on stage and argue about it, and what are we congratulating ourselves that it doesn't happen this day and age? I think it's a real worry. So I think sometimes it has to be.
Yeah, it was very brave of them to tackle any of these subjects in popular musical form. In in South Pacific, you have two of the greatest ballads ever written for musical
This Nearly
theatre.
Was Mine, is it?
This Nearly Was Mine and Some Enchanted Evening. And I suppose what you've got to be careful of doing is not treating them as showpieces in the show. They have to really come out of the dramatic
Well, again, This
situation.
Nearly Was Mine, because they'd cut Now Is the Time, we put that back in. He goes off, originally he sings, he sings it with, Cable Still There. And you can't sing that soliloquy and say, now I'm alone, still dreaming. He wouldn't say those words in front. So Trevor and we discussed it and said, he's got to be alone to sing that song. So we went back to the original, because I can't, a man of his, because he's only learnt things from books. He's a peasant. He doesn't know how to handle women very well at all. It's not this romantic French, it's crap, really. Well,
It was a great production.
Yeah, so we were alone. He has to be alone for that.
Fantastic.
And you do feel alone on the Olivier when you do that one, let me tell you. There's nowhere to hide.
I mean, looking at you in this situation, Philip, it's hard to believe you've suffered in the past from stage fright, I mean, how did that manifest itself?
It was during Les Mis. And it's a virus. Once it's entered, it's always there. And I try not to panic. It's and trying to laugh it off. But in a musical, it's worse because if you stuff up, everyone knows. Because, but I was doing the suicide scene, and because I was so concentrated, and I didn't see anyone, because Javert never sees anyone backstage. They do all the mucking around, but I was always in the dressing room or alone. I was coming on, how allow this man, as I'm walking along the bridge, to hold dominion over me, this desperate, whatever it is. And I look in the wings, and the girls, these two girls had taken their clothes off and had their, that wouldn't happen now, but had their tits out, their dresses up. And I went, what the, is that? And then I realised I'd sung a line and didn't know I'd sung it. And then I looked, I didn't know where I was. So I said, and of course everyone came because I was just going, it was complete gobbledygook. Then I went off stage and they're all laughing because the orchestra was doing that, and then they were laughing. And then this wave of nausea came over me, and I vomited in the garbage because it sounded like... But then I went to go on the next night.
Oh, that's the thing.
And it was just like... I walked out to get out, and I didn't know what was happening. So the first thing I had to do was go off coffee, because I'd been drinking too much coffee, so I tend never to drink coffee at least 6 hours before a performance. But I went to an occupational therapist who deals with stroke victims, because it's just a virus that's been planted, and you've got to not push that key again. One of the rules is never go over your lines before you go on, because that's reinforcing the virus. So I had to walk on and go. I'd sit in the wings and go, we're in the money, da, da, da. Now bring me prisoner 2 for it. I had to go on. And then I had to, she gave me a letter to hand to the conductor, and I didn't know what it was, but later on the conductor said, it was, can you make as much eye contact and smile with Philip as much as possible? So during the suicide, I'd be looking down, and I'd be going, and he'd be looking at me. And I'm just... But it got so bad that I started having cold showers in the night because I just got into panic. But it was just recalibrating it, not to let it go. I mean, I meditate. I have been doing it for the last I did it years ago, but rediscovered it again about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's certainly made a difference. And AM and I both do it a lot now, don't we, Emery? Yeah, it's just something so that you're not putting that pressure on another actor either. You just it's not fair to run around and go, oh, I'm so nervous. Just stay in your own zone, and that helps a lot.
I want to talk.
I'm getting sick of the sound of my own voice.
What? I have to say. No. A little bit longer.
No. I'm getting embarrassed.
I want to talk a little bit about La Cage aux Folles because I think it's such a beautiful show, and Jerry Herman doesn't often get the credit he deserves, despite his fame. He's often talked about as being the polar opposite of Sondheim, being the old Broadway showman, but he was so much more than that, and that piece is special, I think.
Well, I had the greatest time doing it with Rog. I never did it I only did it for a week with Doug. Doug never opened the show, so we had to open it with the understudy at the Chocolate Factory for 3 weeks, and I went on with this wonderful boy, Spencer, who was about... It was perverse, really, that I had this toy boy as an old lover. But he was wonderful. Look, it's quite extraordinary to sing that. How often is someone going to... Look over there, look... He still follows all the same rules as speech, where you're not stressing a word that you wouldn't stress in speech. You can say, how often is someone concerned with the tiniest thread of your life? There's a little caesura. How often is someone concerned with what? With the tiniest thread of your life. And it's there. How often is someone concerned with the tiniest thread of your life? And all those rules that are in Shakespeare are there, to be or not to be. That little caesura is in all those lines. Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger. And he follows all those rules. Those people, those Broadway writers were old school, parsing, learning grammar, learning the rules, and they didn't type.
That's why it's so amazing that Rogers worked the other way around initially with Lorenz Hart.
Yeah.
He was writing the melodies first.
Yes.
And Hart was such a virtuoso that he could produce all these wicked, well, Sondheim's quite critical of him, his book, but, you know, because they're not true rhymes, they're slant rhymes and clever little...
But you can tell, I mean, I've spoken this about, you can tell when I did Evita, and it's no criticism, because I think Andrew writes incredible tunes and stuff, but when someone is singing... the truth is, I never left you. That stress doesn't exist anywhere in language. And that's because it's a tune that existed, and Tim's very good at it, as Don Black is, to try and fit the lyric to fit the tune. But if I spoke that, if I said, the truth is, I never left you, the only reason you get away with it is because she's got a microphone in front of her.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I actually once asked Don Black what his favourite lyric was that he'd written.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know why I'm frightened. Beginning of It's As If We Never Said Goodbye in Sunset. And he said, those are the best lyrics that are real thoughts in the moment, that aren't fabricated, they're real thoughts. Well, I don't know why I'm frightened.
It's funny because a lot of teaching we discover now, because kids type so much, all language, as Stephen Sondheim told me in that room, what will happen is that language is becoming percussive as a result, because he saw the first signs of it, then that everything has got the same musical value. I don't want to get into it. We now talk like we type. When you had cursive language, you know, you'd go, you know, you'd write the word tit as in a bird, going tit, you go tit, tit, tit. So the onomatopoeic thing was there on the dot. Now you go tit. Doesn't make sense. But what I will do with students now, and I would have never done this once, is to say, if you've got a line that says, you know, do you want a drink of water? If you do, pick up the glass. And they go, do you want a drink of water? If you do, pick up the glass. I say, can you now sing it? And they go, do you want a drink of water? Do you want a drink of water? And then you've got to wait for their action. Pick up the glass. And then they will naturally give it the right length because they've sung them in nursery rhymes. But their everyday speech is now becoming representative speaking. Now, language has always changed with the print. Oh, I'm going on.
And shorthand as well.
Yeah.
We were talking about melody, and I think it's the greatest of all musical gifts. Often maligned. You know, the great melodists are very few and far between. Rogers was certainly one. But another one was Lucy Simon, our dear friend. And I didn't know anything about Lucy Simon until I was driving along in America one day with a friend, and he put on that duet from Lily's Eyes from Secret Garden, and we got to that amazing key change that you can't see coming. And I nearly went through the roof of the car, and I said, what is this? And that was the beginning of it. And I never met Lucy until I referred to that moment and that score, because I went away and listened to it. In another article, I was writing about someone else, and it was only 2 lines, and she wrote me this beautiful letter, as only Lucy could.
Yeah, beautiful.
She was a gentle soul, and if ever a subject was ripe for Lucy's attention, it's Secret Garden. The idea of renewal being achieved through a garden.
Well, it's funny you say
her,
that, because although How Do You Know, I think the end of that is the most glorious thing. You know, how can I hope to go on without you? Because how could I ever know? I think that's the most beautiful, luscious thing. Oh, I can't help but listen to that but cry. But I wrote a lyric once for her. She said, write me a lyric, and I wrote a lyric, and she couldn't write it. She couldn't write music to it because she thought it was just too... negative's not the word, but it didn't have a natural... It didn't have hope in it. Which is very interesting, I thought.
Interesting. I once dared to mention Secret Garden to Sondheim.
Yeah.
He made one of those faces. And
I thought the one we did here, we rewrote. They rewrote a lot. They cut out a lot of the stuff which I would perceive as.
I said it's a beautiful score to him, boldly. And
Chris Walker, I think, redid it all.
Is it that it's too sweet to Sondheim? And he said, yeah, too sweet. And I said something extraordinary at that point. I plucked out courage and I said, well, what about the last two songs in Into the Woods? Which was very bold of me. And he put me down with the most wonderful rejoinder. He said, that is the only music I could have written at that point in the piece. So, shut up. I mean, that's what it was. But Lucy was just one of those, honest souls, but a born melodist, a great melodist.
I have to say, just quickly, the reason I think the songs that I love are ones that are narrative, because I got brought up and I said the country music capital, but I love all those songs that have got a story in them. If it's not Jolene, or it's not the Harper Valley PTA, those songs that have got a story, because I grew up on all those, out on the board, the old shearer stands, they've got a story to them, those ballads. I've always had a penchant for those French, for the songs that have got stories. And all those Australian folk ones, Moreton Bay. One Sunday morning as I went walking by Brisbane Wharf, as I chanced to... I love all those that have got a story to them. And Lucy is very good with those narratives.
You got me this evening when you did Race You to the Top of the Morning, because that's the first song that made a real impression, apart from the impact of Lily's eyes. And when she gave me the piano score, and she said, where do you want me to write on it? And I said, I want you to write on that song. It's a beauty. Philip and I went into the studio one day when I was doing a radio program on Lucy. And he very kindly offered to come in and sing.
No, Lucy asked me.
Lucy asked me.
But I couldn't say no to her, because she's too gorgeous.
Yeah, exactly. And we did this radio show, and you know what's coming now, don't you?
I do. He's going to put me through this, so I'm not going to pretend that we didn't do this the other night, and it's very painful for me.
No, but I love watching people listen to their own singing. It's really special. This is a moment, and it was live, no retakes. It's completely live, and it's about one song in Secret Garden. Yeah.
You get this lyric, a bit of earth. Well, give us the whole lyric, Lucy, and how did you go about setting it?
Well, Mary goes to Archie when she realizes that she's found that she loves the garden, and the person that loved the garden before Mary came along was Archie's wife, Lily. So it totally confounds Archie that this little child has come to him and said that what she wants is a little bit of earth. And the lyric is, a bit of earth. She wants a little bit of earth. She'll plant some seeds. And it shows Archie's being totally bewildered. And how do you write that? And I just sat down. A bit of earth. She wants a little bit of earth. She'll plant some seeds. So that the emotion just rolled over itself.
Yeah, there's no other way of setting it.
No other way. I mean, there was no choice. That's how it had to go. Yeah. But of course, the interpretation becomes something that is quite different, and having the joy of working with Philip twice, because, as he said, he played Neville in Australia, and I went and I saw him there. And actually, because of that, when we came to casting in London, Adrian Noble and I said, well, Philip Quast would be wonderful. I said, but Philip is a low voice. But we could change the keys for Philip. And I know that Philip would just bring so much to this role. So Philip came all the way from Australia to sing Archie.
A bit of earth. She wants a little bit of earth. She'll plant some seeds. The seeds will grow. The flowers bloom, but is their bounty what she needs? How can she chance to love a little bit of earth? Does she not know the earth is old and doesn't care if one small girl wants things to grow? She needs a friend. She needs a father, brother, sister, mother's arms. She needs to laugh. She needs to dance and learn to work her girlish charms. She needs a home. The only thing she really needs I cannot give. Instead she asks a bit of earth to make it live. She should have a pony gallop across the moor. She should have a doll's house with 100 rooms per floor. Why can't she ask for a treasure? Something that money can buy that won't die. When I give her the world, she asks instead for some earth. A bit of earth. She wants a little bit of earth. She'll plant some seeds. The seeds will grow. The flowers bloom, their beauty just the thing she needs. She'll grow to love the tender roses, lilies fair, the iris tall. And then in time, a bit of earth will freeze and kill them all. A bit of earth, a bit of earth, a bit of earth, a bit of earth.
Feels like this is your life.
It's beautiful. Philip, how can we lure you back to London?
Ask Anne-Marie.
I mean, would you like to do another cabaret like this? A different cabaret? Or would you prefer to return in a special role?
I don't know. We've got to go to Hanoi first, and then I don't know, because I don't know what tomorrow. Look, Anne-Marie and I will have separation anxiety, because we do have our fights, don't we, AM? But in a good way, and I wouldn't do it without her. Partially because we've taught a lot together, and we sort of know. And she does give me the odd vocal thing just sometimes when I doubt it, when I doubt of having a little trouble. You can just see pushing down on that, because she's a great vocal voice teacher, one of the greats. Look, I don't know. I'd like to say yes, would come back, but I don't know. It'd have to be another show.
Let's just say you're welcome anytime.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Thanks.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you.